Okay, so I am recording this to show everyone how to finish up their games with an end screen or a win screen. I also want to talk a little bit about physics and talk a little bit about what I've done in this scene to finish up to get to a goal, which is for me to light a signal fire to get like rescued by a plane or something like that. There's also a booby trap in here that I made as a challenge, and it's going to kill my character so I can lose as well, and that brings up a death screen. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. So I'm going to hit play here. And you notice that that block kind of fell down. And if I run over, I can hit these things and they move around. They have physics. And I'm using that physics with this booby trap that I have over here. I have this booby trap that you can see. It's like a kind of like a roof coming out of the side of the shed, and it's got some ice blocks on top of it. And those are my ice blocks of death. And if they hit my character's head, then they're going to. So if they fall on my head, the end screen comes up, my character disappears, there's some blood on the screen, and then I can either restart or quit. Let's go ahead and restart. So the other thing that I'll show you also is if I run over here, or sorry, if I grab my three spinning heads here, open the door and grab my flare, which I talked about last time. If I go to there, I ran through it and I didn't get there in time. So I talked about this last time, that you have a certain amount of chances of grabbing flares, and if they go out, then you're gonna have to grab another, and you run out, then you're not going to be able to actually trigger it. So there, I lit the fire, and I ended up pulling up this windscreen. So the windscreen is giving me pretty much the same thing as the death screen did, some text, and I didn't use an image on this one, but it gives me the restart and quit buttons. So let's just go to quit this time. And I am having some errors come up. So I just changed something in here, and I guess yeah, that error I thought I fixed. But apparently I did not. And that's coming from something that I added to my my windscreen, I think. So not the widget, but the actual part where I win the game. So that's this one here, where the fire is spawned, or actually the fire isn't spawned, but yes, the fire is spawned in here. So if I look in the viewport, this is actually the fire for this blueprint. So it's a actor blueprint where I've added fire, and that's really and a little bit of an explosion to start the fire. And this is just being spawned. When we go to the event graph of this, since it's just being spawned, you can use an event begin play. So whenever you spawn something, when it gets spawned, it's like it began, right? It's the first time that it exists in the game. So if you run it off of the event begin play in your graph, then when it gets spawned, this is what's going to happen automatically. And in this case, what's happening, because the fire exists here, it's going to happen no matter what. You don't have to turn the fire on. It's just you add a Niagara particle system to your actor blueprint, and I have a point light as well. And I've got another one which has an explosion in it. It's another Niagara particle system. So those three things are what's in here. These get spawned because they exist in here automatically. They'll just be there. And so the event graph, you want to go over here for whatever else you want to happen when the fire gets spawned. And since this fire is being spawned for my wind condition, what I have is a widget, and it's this widget right here, which is, we've done widgets. This is just like the ones we've done, in that I create a canvas panel, type in canvas, choose a canvas panel and drag it in. And then once you have your canvas panel, you can then drag in your text. So I've got a couple of lines of text that I've dragged in. So you can just drag in your text and set what it says, the color of it, size of it, anchor it. In this case, I'm anchoring it to the center here. And then you also have buttons up here that you can add. And so there's a button there, and you can drag buttons in, and you can drag text on top of it. And so these are actually separate pieces, but they kind of when you drag the button in first, and then I'll just do it. Let's say I drag a button in and resize it to whatever I want. And then I drag some text in and put it on top of it, automatically snaps onto the button. And so, but these are separate objects. You set your text, you set your button, however you want to set it. And I'm going to just delete this. And so I have a quit button and a restart button. And they're really just a button with text. And the way you make these buttons do something, they're going to be clickable because they're buttons. You're really just setting the size and the color of them. But then down on the bottom here, you have events that you can turn on, and by hitting the little plus symbols, and that will actually make it on clicked, and it'll switch you over to the graph for the button, and then here this will come up on clicked button. And say for the quit game one, you're going to use a quit game node. So just, pull out of it and say quit game, or quit game right here. function. And then for the other one, it's more complicated. So the quit game function is very simple. But the other button that I have here, which is the restart button, that one, you want to open level by object reference, and you're going to choose the name of the level that you're currently in. And then that one needs to go to a set input mode game only node. And it's going to need to have some kind of input on that for the player controller. And so you're going to get player controller, come out of that and do a get player controller. Player index 0 is my main player. There's also going to be an event pre-construct in here. There will be several nodes, like you can see a couple other ones here. One of them that will be automatically in here is an event pre-construct. You're going to want to come out of that to a set input mode UI only. And what that's going to do is give you your mouse again after you restart. So this part down here is going to take you to your level again and restart it. And this one up here is going to give you control of your mouse again. And see, it says set show mouse cursor over here. So you're going to need the player controller, so you're going to hook into that. You can come out of it here, or you can come out of it here, but you're going to hook it all into the same thing, the player controller, because this is giving you access to that player controller again with your mouse cursor. So that's allowing you to restart it. This is allowing you to quit it. And that's all part of this win widget. And so the other part of it is a little more complicated. If we look over here, just to finish up the win condition one, I've got this little pile of burnt logs and stuff. That's what I'm lighting. And what's here is what you're going to trigger with is a collider. So let's find that collider. You just look for trigger. Okay, so here it is. It's called fire trigger sphere. And if I select it, it's sort of placed right there. And I guess I had hit G or something because my gizmos were hidden, but so I just turned it back on again. And now you can kind of see it there. It's got it's just a so I wanted to be able to run over here and trigger that fire. And if I look at what's going on with this, the way you add that is you're going to go to your add button up here, and I've talked about this before. You place actors panel is what I used. And if I let me just move it a little bit over here. If you look at it, you can add a trigger box to your world, or you can add a trigger sphere. I added a trigger sphere and scaled it and moved it, named it fire trigger sphere, and moved it to right on top of my fire. And if we, you just go, so you can see it's going under the ground, but that's fine. And it's placed kind of around my fire. And I might want to actually make it a little bit bigger. I mean, it looks okay the way it is, but maybe I'll make it stick out a little bit more by increasing the size a little bit. There we go. And so I'm going to end up running up and hitting that trigger. And let's go ahead and save that. And remember to always go down here, check what you have unsaved, and go ahead and save it. You don't want those building up. Do it every few, minutes or seconds, depending on how much you're doing. Don't keep doing things in Unreal Engine without saving, because it can crash on you. So, all right, so I've got a trigger sphere, and when you have that, you can then go into your level blueprint, and you can, if you have it selected, you can add an event. And so on actor begin overlap is what I added as my event. So if I right click over here and you have it selected, you're going to get some events that you can add up here that will use that what it is that you have selected. And so add the event to it of actor begin overlap fire trigger sphere. And then we're casting to the Erno third person. And make sure you connect to other actor, to the object of that cast. And the reason we want to do that is because for this is my win event. I have to have a flare in my hand when I collide with that trigger sphere for the fire to actually light the fire. And so it's checking here with a branch to see if has flare is true. And if has flare is true, that's the logic, then it's going to spawn the blueprint that I created, the actor blueprint for the fire, what I call fire spawn. That's this one. So I have the wood already there. It's just spawning the fire. And in order to actually find out where to spawn it here in your level blueprint, is you want to plug in, you want to right click the location and split the struct spin, the struct pin, and it's going to basically give you your XYZ for location that you can plug in manually. And you plug it in manually by actually dragging your blueprint into your scene to place it where you think it should be, and then look at the numbers that you get under location over here. And you want to just plug in the same numbers to your blueprint, level blueprint, to spawn it in the same place. So you do it in the interface inside of the editor, and then you look at your location numbers and you plug them in here. And that's how you know where to spawn it at. And I usually turn this always spawn, ignore collisions whenever I'm spawning something, because I don't want collisions to cause a problem with it. And you, of course, plug in the blueprint that you want to spawn. In this case, it's the BP fire spawn. So this node, I've talked about spawning quite a bit. It's, type in spawn actor from class is what you want for that. And it'll have all this for you to plug in. You'll just have to right click and split the structure of the pin to get these individual numbers to plug in. Okay, so that's how you can spawn something at a location, or really spawn a blueprint actor. You have to make your thing into a blueprint actor to use that. And even if it's just got nothing but a fire in it, it's going to work fine. So I'm hitting the trigger, it's spawning the fire, and it's using the has flare variable that I have on my character. So here's my character, and I added a Boolean has flare variable to this. It's by default not true, and then when I grab a flare, I set it to true. And that's over in, actually, that blueprint is over here with my flare pickup blueprint. So here's my flare blueprint, or flare pickup blueprint. I've got a box of flares inside of my shed. It's got a, if I look at the viewport, this is what it looks like. It's got some static meshes for some flares that I made that are just cylinders that I made red. It's just a cylinder that's made red. And so I'm just adding cylinders, scaled them, made one of them red, and then duplicated it to have several of those. And then the box itself, I'm actually got it from Megascans, downloaded it and added it here as a static mesh and plugged it in. I did some work on the texture map for that inside of Photoshop, which I talked about last class. And then I also added a trigger box here by adding box, right? Type in box and box collision. So I've got a collider, a box collider that I've scaled up. And when I hit that box collider, the main thing that it's doing is it's to register the hit, it's casting to my metahuman as usual. It's plugging in other actor to the object, and then it's pulling out of this cast the variables that I need for this, which is the has flare variable and another one, number of flares. I need to check that because you can actually grab more than one flare up to a certain number that I set right here, less than or equal to a number. In this case, I've got 3 in there. So I can keep grabbing flares until I get up to 3 or 4 flares. Sometimes this doesn't fire quite right and it ends up, I get 4 flares, but that's fine. It doesn't set it whatever is going to work for you. And then it's looking in this one, it's checking to see if has flare, which is on my character, is false, meaning I don't have a flare. Therefore, it's going to go to another branch that it checks to see, okay, if you don't have a flare, how many flares have you picked up? If you picked up less than or equal to 3, then set the has flare variable, which you again pull out of over here where you're referencing your character. You pull out has flare and set, and you can then say, okay, well, now you have a flare, right? You didn't have any flares in your hand. Now you grabbed another flare. Because you have less than or equal to 3, so you can grab another flare. If you don't have less than or equal to 3, which means you have 4, yeah, okay, that's why you can get 4 with this. Yeah. Then if you have 4, then you're going to have one more flare here. You have the flare, but then, sorry, true. If you have 4, okay, less than or equal to 3. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Okay. So, sorry, less than or equal to 3. It says, yeah, it's greater than, the logic is greater than or equal to 3. So, okay. So if that's true, greater than or equal to 3, then, yeah, I could have switched that logic. Honestly, I think I thought that through, but then looking at the logic now, I think maybe I should have used less than or equal to and switched these pins around. But it works fine. It's just giving me 4 instead of 3 here because it says greater than or equal to 3. If that's true, then that means I have 4. Therefore, you get one more flare, and then it destroys the box because this is on the box. And once the box is destroyed, you can't grab any more flares, right? Because the trigger and everything is on the box. So that's the logic of that. That's why I'm getting 4 flares before it disappears. And then if it's false, greater than or equals to 3, then it means I've got 0 through 3, and therefore you're just going to get a flare. It's going to reset the number of flares or add to it first and set the number of flares. And that's all going back to where the third person character, which is where the variables are. So yeah, that's the logic for that. I think I could have switched that and used less than or equal to 3 instead and switched these pins, and it would have been a little better because then it would just be 3 and not actually able to grab 4. But it doesn't matter if you know that. You can plug it in for whatever you want. Um, if I really wanted 3 with this particular logic, I just put 2 in my number here, and now it's going to let me grab 3. So the end result is the same, but my logic in here is a little convoluted, I think. But it works fine. So let's go and take a look at the death thing. So I think that's everything for the winning thing. You grab a flare, you light the fire, and you get to your win screen. The death screen is actually the same as far as the widget blueprint goes. It's text. It's got a restart and quit. It works the same. It's got actually the same names, and actually you make one of these and you can just duplicate the widget, rename it to something else. So whether you do the death screen first or the win screen first, you can create one of these first, get it working over in your graph, and then just duplicate the entire widget and change the name and go in here to the designer and change your text, and you will have the other screen kind of automatically. The only thing that I did in addition to the death to this screen on the death is I also made a blood splatter screen as well. So that is also just a canvas panel that I've added an image to. So image is another one of your common UI widgets that you can drag in. And when you drag it in, you're going to open up the brush parameter, and there will be some place that you can plug in your image. And so what I did was I went into Photoshop and I created an image that is 1920 by 1080. And you know, if you go to File, New, and you create your 1920 by 1080 image, make sure that you put your background as transparent. If you want to have something like a blood splatter, then I need a transparent background. I don't want to make, because I don't know exactly what size my game is going to be at this point. And so as far as putting an image in like this that has a particular size, I would want the edge to be transparent, because that way it's going to be in the middle of the screen. So if the edges of the image are transparent, you won't notice an edge, right? No matter what size it ends up being. So you just, want the stuff to come up in the middle of the screen, which is masked off here. And I just created that by going to online and doing a search for blood splatters with a PNG, and most of these do not actually have transparency on them. I had to select the middle part of them to get the blood splatter part, and I just used a select color range and clicked on the red part to get that. That's an easy thing to do. It allows you to select the part that you want, and then after you have the part that you want, you can do a layer mask and from transparency, and that will just mask it off so that I can paint on it a little bit and make it as red as I want it to be, and then export it out as a PNG file. You might need to merge your layers, make sure that you keep your transparency for the final one that you have, and import it into your Unreal Engine by dragging it into a folder. So I have my decals folder. I ended up putting my texture in there, dragging it into there. I just used the default settings when it came in. I didn't change any of these settings. And that's it. Once you have that, once you have your PNG file in there with your transparency, then you can plug it into your brush on your widget blueprint. It's going to come up to size. You're going to anchor it wherever you want. I anchored it to the center of the image and saved it out. And so I'm bringing that up when I die. And the way I'm dying here, here's where it's actually bringing it up along with the other widget for the text. And the way I'm dying is I've got a trigger for a head death. So I didn't want to just use the character controller as my collider for this, because let's say I run under the booby trap. So I've got this booby trap over here. And let's say I run under that booby trap and it explodes and this goes away and these fall down. But I run through it and it misses me. And then I run back for some reason before I finish the game and I collide with these pieces of ice that are sitting on the ground. If I'm using the character collider, which goes all the way to the ground, then I would die as soon as I hit one of these with my feet. And that didn't seem like a realistic thing. You want to die only if it hits you in the head. So in order to do that, I made a head collider that I'm attaching to my character's head bone, as I've done before with a socket. So my character, which is the BP Erno character, if I go look at him in my viewport, if I look at the body, this particular character, or actually, do I want the body? Actually, let's go and look at him in the world. So let's just go here, and I'm gonna actually, yeah, yeah, he's being spawned. So let me go find him over here, Erno, and we'll just click him here. And if I look down in his Okay, that's what I'm looking for. Okay, it's on the self node, which is the very top node of the blueprint for my third person character. And it's actually not my metahuman. It's the uh, third person character that's controlling the metahuman here. And there's a skeletal mesh asset that I was looking for, which is the SKM Quinn Simple. And it actually probably should be the same thing for you because you guys are connecting to the same third person character. So if I go find that by clicking on the folder and double clicking that to open it up, then we can look over at the skeleton tree on the left. If you're in asset details, just switch the skeleton tree. And if I look and find the head bone, I've made a death socket, a head death socket. And just right click the head bone, add socket, and name it. And so I've got this socket that's right where my character's head is. And I created a blueprint to add a collider to that. So, and I'm using the spawn thing that to spawn the actor blueprint, just like I've done with so many things. So if I go back to my blueprints and I look for that, what I have for that is something called BP head death trigger. If I open that up, you can see it has nothing in the graph. There's no nodes really in the graph. And then if I go to viewport, the only thing in this whole thing is a trigger. So all I did was add, type in sphere and add a sphere collision. So that's it. There's just a trigger, and I didn't scale it or anything. It's just set to 1, and that's saved as a blueprint. And the reason that's saved as a blueprint because I wanted to attach it to my character's head. And if you're going to attach it to your character, you're going to do it in your character's blueprint. So, so if I go to Erno's blueprint again, and I go to the graph, you'll see a section here that I've added to spawn a head collider to trigger the ice cube death. And it's coming off, it really, that collider needs to be on the character from the very beginning of the game when you play it. So it's coming out of event begin play. I added in a sequence node to that after the hair LOD setup. Normally this would, or originally this just went over here into the player input to get all the movement of the player from the third person character. We did that. We pasted it in here and connected this. But I want to connect something else now. So I added a sequence node. I'm going out of pin 1 to all of that input stuff because it's really important and I want that to happen first. And then pin 2 is actually coming up here to this section that is doing a spawn actor by class, and the class is the head death collider that I just showed you. And I'm attaching it to the head death socket, which I created on the character. And you plug in the name exactly as you made it. Casing does matter here. And the reason you do this in the player character is because you have access to the mesh up here. You have to drag the mesh node in order to reference it as your target for those sockets that you're looking for on the skeleton. And also when you attach it to the component, which is the socket later on. So over here, you're bringing in the socket's location and you're spawning at that location the collider. Then you're coming out of this to promote to variable, to catch the name of the collider that you're spawning. I'm calling it head spawn. It becomes a new variable over here. So you rename it and it comes up as the name here. And then you connect into that, both set and target, to an attach actor to component, and you plug in the socket again. The parent connects back to the mesh. And that spawns out that collider on my character's head. I snap to target both for location and rotation. So it's right there on his head from the beginning of the game. It's hidden because it's just a collider, but then that's going to register when I get hit. And what's registering that is I created another blueprint for the ice blocks that are going to be on top of the booby trap. And that is just a cube with a icy texture on it. And the cube itself, you're just going to add a cube here to create that. I'm leaving it at the default 1 scaling. And then I'm adding a glacier texture to it. And then what's important is this has to fall. So if I go back here and I hit play, you can see I've got a couple of objects here falling down. And that's because they have physics on them. And you can do that with anything. Let me just stop this. So I've got this object up here that, or it's just a cube. And we can create another one. Let's just, I'll just delete that for right now. And let's just create another cube here. So I'm going to add to my scene. Let's create a shape cube. And you can see it's there. I can put, let's put a material on it, just like a glacier, my glacier material that I'm using in my scene. And then I'm gonna just rotate it a little bit in a couple of directions so that it falls in a more interesting way. And it's not gonna fall if I hit play right now, it's just gonna be floating up there, right? It's not gonna fall. So what you need to do is you need to go down and find physics and turn on simulate physics and maybe mass. Maybe I want this to have like a 500 mass. It's falling ice of death. And then I'm just going to leave the linear damping, angular damping to default. Now you can go down. There is some physics materials that you can plug in. I plugged in an ice material that was loaded in from I guess from the starter contents. But there is an ice material that I plugged in. And I think that makes it a little more like sliding, easier. And then you might have to look at the collisions to make sure they're set correctly too. But let's just go ahead and try this on this object. I'll hit play again, and I see that it falls. And I'm getting a little bit of texture streaming there. But if I run up to it and bang into it, you can see that it moves around. Now, I set the mass to like 500, so maybe that's a bit. Let's see what happens if I set that mass down. It seems kind of heavy, and didn't really move much when it fell. But let's try again to go back, and we'll set the physics mass back down to 100 and try that and hit play. And I see it moves a lot. It actually slides more. That actually looks a little bit more like ice. So I think that, I don't know what I set it to in here in my blueprint actor. So I could go down and see, and I set it to 500 there. So they don't move a whole lot. I could go back and set that back down to 100 and save it, compile and save, and go ahead and try that again. And I'll run over. That really, you saw I really knocked it out of the way. But let's see what happens when these hit my head. Yeah, they're moving around maybe too much now. Again, the texture streaming's a problem right now. So it's so I think 500 might be a little bit too much. 100 is too low for me. I'm gonna put 300 into my ice cube here and compile and save it. So you can play with those numbers, but the physics thing is important to know about. Also, if we go back and look, there's a barrel there too, and that's a megascan object. And one thing that you have to know about the megascan objects is that they don't have colliders by default. And if you turn physics on, they're actually going to fall right through the floor with the gravity and everything turned on there, unless you go into the object itself, find the object itself. So here it is, that's the static mesh. If I go find that object and open it up, you need to go and create a collider under collision here. You need to add like a collider, simple collision, probably one of these, so that it won't fall through the floor, and save it. That's going to be really important. So, okay. That's how the ice blocks are falling, is with that physics on them. And I did create the booby trap. Let's take a quick look at that, and then I'll wrap this up. So if I go to my blueprints again, the booby trap itself is just I created a cube and scaled it to be the roof, and just put a material on it. So that's just a static mesh. Added a static mesh here of a cube, and then put the materials on it. I also added a trigger box below it and scaled it so that it would fit underneath it. And then I added a Niagara explosion sort of towards the top. All of those pieces are there. Select the trigger box, go over or right click it, and add a on component begin overlap. Look for the third person, as we've done many times, other actors connected. Don't need to pull out any variables on that character. All I need to do is, I'm doing a do once here, because you might be standing in that trigger box for a while, because as soon as you run in there, if you get hit in the head with one of those blocks, your character's gonna stay in the trigger box and it might fire multiple times. So you want to run a do once early on, right after you cast your character. And then after you do that, I'm playing a sound for the explosion. I've got an explosion sound, play sound at location. I'm doing a get world location here and plugging in the mesh that I have in this particular blueprint for the roof. So it's going to play a sound above you when you run in there of an explosion. It's going to run the Niagara explosion that's in the scene here. In order to not have it run automatically when you're in the viewport, you need to set the Niagara explosion, turn off auto activate, which will be on. So you turn that off and it's not going to fire when it's placed in the scene. You only want it to fire when you hit the trigger. So you want it to be in here and you want to activate it right here. So you do an activate node to the Niagara explosion, which is in your blueprint here. So you can just drag it in. And then I'm doing a delay of 1 second in order to hear the sound and also see the blocks fall to the ground for a second. And then I'm destroying, this delay is actually for to give you a chance to get out of the way. So you're gonna run into the trigger, you're gonna hear a sound and see the explosion above you, and you have a second to run through it or run back before the whole thing gets destroyed. The panel will get destroyed and the blocks will fall, because the blocks are not part of this. The blocks are placed on top of this so that when this gets destroyed, the blocks will fall from the gravity and the physics that are on them. So this delay here gives you a second to get out of the way and not get killed. And then the block itself, what it has on it is it has a collider, a trigger collider that's right around the cube. And when that cube falls down, if it hits that trigger that I placed on the character's head, so you cast directly to that blueprint for that trigger and make it the other object. I'm not casting to the character in this case. And so if that's cast happens and you collide with that head part of your character, then it's going into this branch condition to check and see if I'm already dead. If I'm not already dead, because it might fire more than once, then it's going to create the blood widget and the text widget to tell you that you died. It's going to play a sound. In this case, I'm just using the wolf howl, but I could have played like a or something, some kind of sound that makes it look like I sound like I got hit in the head. And then it's pausing the game, set game paused, turned on to true. And then it's the reason I'm casting to the third person character here is because I wanted to set is dead to true over here. And the is dead variable. Wait, no, that's a local variable. Because I wanted to destroy the actor. I'm casting to the third person character because I wanted to be able to make the target of this destroy actor the actual character, so that the character disappears after a second. There is a 2-second delay back here. That's so that this sound has time to happen, as well as sort of allows the blocks to fall to the ground before the game gets paused. Because once the game gets paused, you're not going to see the blocks moving anymore. I wanted to be able to make sure that the player knows what actually happened. So you see the blocks fall to the ground, and then it pauses the game and sets your being dead. Now there's some kind of loop happening here that I thought I fixed with this is dead variable that is causing me to actually wait, no, that's not happening here. Never mind. That worked fine. So I put this is dead variable to keep this from firing multiple times. I think I need to do the same thing with the win condition one, because it's actually doing something where I'm getting an error, and I think it's because of firing multiple times when the player character is not active or is destroyed. But everything works. I just I'm going to debug that, and you don't have to have it. The only reason I'm having trouble destroying the character here is because I'm not colliding with the character over here. I wanted to use the head trigger. And you may not have something like that. You might just have your character running into a trigger, and then it probably wouldn't be the same issue. So anyway, that's how you can do your end screens and your win and your death screens, setting up some kind of condition for that. And good luck with that and finishing up your project.